Hello, Alex here, and in this video I want to talk about my first roll of Seagull Color IR100, a 35-ish year old, more than 30 year expired color negative film which I shot in the Canon F-1. Let's get into it. Right off the bat, despite what some people think when they see the name, this film is not infrared sensitive. It is, or was, a consumer-grade color-negative film manufactured by Shanghai Seagull Camera back in China in the 80s and 90s, and it was just a consumer-grade color-negative film with an ISO rating of 100. Now though, it's a bit different. Looking at the negatives real quick, you can see they are very thin and they are basically monochromatic. As near as I can tell, this film has suffered severe degradation of the dye couplers, which results in most of the traits of this film. There are black dots in most of the images where there are damage to the emulsion, and there are some chemical spots here and there. But it just so happens, by pure chance, that the overall color palette is nice. It's sort of reminiscent of like an ambro type with really low saturation, really low contrast, and overall warm color palette, with a little bit more blue and green in the shadows than an actual ambro type. The film has a nominal ISO rating of 100, but due to age it needs to be overexposed to compensate for the degradation of the dye couplers. I haven't shot a bracketed test roll myself, though I have seen others do that, and the sweet spot seems to be EI25, because if you go beyond 25 to 12 or 6, you don't significantly improve negative density and you don't really improve image quality at all. You just make the film harder to shoot. 25 is pretty manageable, so that's what I went with for this roll. Each canister contains 36 exposures and they are not DX coded, so communication of the frame count and the ISO rating to your camera is not possible. As this is a color negative film designed for consumer rather than cinema use, it is designed for development in the standard C41 chemical process, yielding negatives, which must be inverted either during the scanning or printing process to yield your final positive images. I shot this roll of film on the last day of a recent trip to visit my friend Dylan over in Glasgow, mostly with the 50mm f1.4, new FD 50mm f1.4, but also the new to me, new FD 20 to 35mm f3.5. And that was an interesting choice for reasons I'll talk about when I actually review this lens. I did a mixture of street photography, like architectural stuff, a bit of landscape, and a lot of flora at the Botanic Gardens, because it seems like every time I cover one of these videos, I end up shooting it at a botanic garden. So I got a wide range of subjects under a decently wide range of conditions. I rated the film at EI25 using the in-camera meter, had it developed at a local lab, and then scanned it with the Fujifilm GFX 100S with the SMC Pentax FA 120mm f4 macro lens on a clip-on adapter, inverted with Negative Lab Pro, and then processed to taste in Adobe Lightroom. On the note of scanning, using the lab standard profile gave me horrible and crunchy results, probably because of the way Negative Lab Pro tried to deal with the extremely thin negatives. So what I played around for a bit and what I settled on was using the linear flat profile and the auto warm white balance. And that gave that really soft muted look that everyone else has in their sample images. So if you're using Negative Lab Pro, that's the way to go. And if you're using something else, I guess try whatever kind of soft or flat profile you have available to you. I only actually got, I think, 34 frames out of this roll because the base is mechanically very stiff due to age. And what happened was, I guess it wasn't wrapping up tightly on the take-up spool, so its diameter got a bit too fat too quick. And after about frame 32, 33, it got very difficult to advance, and in hindsight, I should have just stopped rather than risking damaging the mechanism. But my last 3 frames ended up overlapping because the camera was physically not able to fully advance frame to frame. I didn't break the sprockets or anything, it was just very tight. Viewing this film through the lens of like a creative effect film, like a Lomachrome film, Double Film, Psych Blues, Kono, those brands, it's like half the price or even a third the price depending on where you live. So if you're into those kind of films, it's way cheaper, which alone is a huge advantage. Unlike Lucky Color Super 100, which I spoke about before, or Kono Moonstruck, which I have shot but not made a video on yet, and I don't know if I will, the look is a lot more consistent. To be brief, a lot of those films, under different conditions, can just not have the look that they're supposed to have. They can give you shots that are just normal, which when you're paying such a premium for them, you know, 16 to 18 euros for Fuji 200 in gold, you want to get that look on every frame if you're paying for it. Where with this film, due to the inherent issues caused by degradation of the dye couplers, yeah, it just has that look all the time. So the consistency is another key aspect compared to its competitors within this sphere. Again, compared to its competitors, the creative effect gimmicky films from all these different brands, the look is generally more appealing under more situations. Under different lighting conditions, different types of subjects, it doesn't alter any specific color in a particularly negative way. It's just nice and it's consistent. I found the Kono Moonstruck didn't really work for certain kind of things. Lucky Color Super was a bit inconsistent and should be rated at higher or lower EIs depending on the lighting and the color palette of your scene. And then Lomachrome Turquoise makes skin tones go blue and everyone looks like Smurfs. This, whether or not you like the look, if you like the look, it will look like that under pretty much all conditions. Okay, there is one exception where it looks very different to this, but I'll talk about that in the deep dive. Firstly, I know I say this for a lot of these videos, but I feel like I would be remiss not to say it. It's old, it's expired, it's not being made anymore, and availability is limited from wherever you choose to buy it. In 5 years' time, you probably won't be able to get this stuff, where Psych Blues and Kono will probably still be in business. Aside from the black dots that are peppered all over the emulsion, which I can live with because at a normal viewing distance you can just ignore them, those darker orange chemical spots do annoy me quite a bit. Just some of them happen to land on really interesting parts of the frame, and if they just weren't there, I would really prefer that, but that's what you get with a film like this. There's nothing you can really do about it. It's not something I really like with this kind of film. It's the same with all these decades old expired films. You know, that's not specific to this film, but it is something about this film that I personally am not a fan of. And it's probably the thing that actually annoys me the most. Needing to shoot the film at 25 to get good results is admittedly quite limiting. You can't just throw it into a point and shoot and use a flash to get extra light onto your subject, because without a DX code, a lot of cameras will default to 100, where you will not get usable images at all. So you want to use this in something like a mechanical SLR camera where you can change everything yourself, shoot wide open or a wide-ish aperture, probably use a flash, maybe use a tripod depending on the kind of photography you're doing. It just restricts your options a little bit. 25 is on the cusp of what's practical for a lot of people that I know. And you might be one of those people, so the need to shoot it at 25 might put you off. I can't say anything for sure, but the mechanical stiffness of the base, as I mentioned, is a bad thing objectively speaking, because it means you might need to shoot it in something with a manual advance lever. There is a possibility that if my roll is on the better side of the norm, or if you have a camera with a particularly weak motor, if you stick it in something with electronic advance, so anything from a point and shoot to an X-Pan, which is what I was thinking of doing, you could risk burning out the motor or just hurting it if the motor is struggling to advance the film. And again, I'm not saying you would hurt your camera. It's not a risk I'm personally willing to take, and I will stick to manual advance cameras with this film just to be safe. Lastly, due to the degradation of the dye couplers, presumably, the overall resolution is quite low. I mean, if you're only creating information in like one color channel fully and then a little bit in another color channel, and then the third channel is empty, yeah, you're not capturing that much information, so it could make sense, if I'm understanding this right, that the resolution is a bit low. You could make an 8x10 or an 11x14 print out of this film, no problem. Just don't be surprised if you pixel peep at 100% and it's not as sharp as Delta 100, you know? I took this shot with the 20-35 wide open at I think half a second handheld, just braced against the wall, and there's a good sense of motion here. Some people are moving, not everyone is moving. It just works quite nicely. I do wish that I waited a fraction of a second more just to not get the headlights of the train, because I think they distract from the composition a little bit. but you know, whatever. This shot was obviously taken under artificial lighting, and I think it works really well. It's the only one that stands out as very different from the daylight balance shots. And I think I'm gonna try a bit more night photography and artificial light stuff with this film going forward. Could be pretty good, especially for night. I mean, what's the harm in ISO 25 or EI25 if you're shooting on a tripod anyway? This shot was taken wide open with the 50 f1.4 at like a 15th of a second because it was quite overcast and we were in the Botanic Gardens. I did crop this one a bit because of the minimum focus distance of the lens, but even so, it's nice and dreamy. The bokeh is really, really good. There's that one leaf in the lower right that I'm not a huge fan of, but whatever. The overall framing here and the flowers are just so beautiful. And reds do seem to punch through a little bit, especially in that last shot with this film. So the little bit of pink on the flowers came out really nicely. This is my favorite shot from the roll, and it was also shot in the Botanic Gardens, also with the 50, just a couple of meters away from where I took the flower shot. And honestly, this one slaps. I'm really happy with the overall tonality and color palette here. So even though the fish aren't red, that little bit of orange sticks through a little bit and you get a decent contrast between the green in the foliage and the orange in the fish themselves. For a film with such a limited color palette, there's a good range of tones here and, and it works really nicely, and I think the composition is pretty well balanced with the lines and the shape of the fish and everything. It's really nice and I really like it. So who is this film for and would I recommend it? If you don't like these color inaccurate, creative effect films that aren't trying to be true to life, yeah, this video isn't gonna change your mind. Don't even bother. If you're into these films, you're probably already looking it up and trying to give it a go. If you're on that edge where you kind of think you like some of these films, the fact that it's cheap and the fact that the look is broadly more usable than some things like Psych Blues No. 5, where you just get strips of neon fuzz through your image, which can just distract from or ruin a composition, is a win for this film. Having to shoot it manually and at a lower EI rating, it does restrict things a little bit, and there will be some inconsistency from roll to roll because it's expired. But I mean, for the price, yeah, give it a go. Will I personally be shooting more of this film though? Yeah. And that says a lot because I normally like very high contrast, very punchy colors and really just vibrant images. You know, Ektar would be my go-to for a lot of things, then slide film, that really high contrast, punchy, vibrant look. For this, something so low contrast, low saturation, if I like that, that kind of says a lot, I think. Maybe. That's all I have to say for this video. So stay safe and bye-bye for now. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Shaka1277 for new pictures every day. If you like this video and enjoy what I do on the channel, please consider subscribing or checking out my Patreon, where the tiers start at just €1 per month.